Yep. Sound working. Let's see. Yep. Hello. Alright. Yeah. Yes. Alright. So there's one person here so far. I'm going to get some more beer before I start. I've had a bit of issues with my connection. Now it seems better. So let's hope it stays like that for the entire stream. My first reaction to doing this on YouTube is that I'd really like Twitch better. At least we have someone here. Let's see. No. And I have quite a bit of delay here, just so you know. It's like 30-second delay or something. So if you write something, it will take me a while to see it. If you're online, maybe write a comment. Hey Steve, nice to have you here. So I'm trying to figure out what's the best way of doing this. I have some dilemmas. One of them is that I am now producing with my headphones, so that the sound aren't leaking into the microphone, of course. I need to figure out a good way also to easily shut my microphone off when I'm producing. Maybe switch to the monitors now and then. Um, well, that just happened. Let's see there. I really like Twitch better so far. Feels more interactive and fun. But this is the basics, so I guess it will work fine. So my idea for this first stream have been changing a lot over the course of the past 24 hours. Hey Tifton, nice to have you here as well. I initially was thinking to do a walkthrough of my track Through the Mines of Casa Doom. But I also want to make a video on that, so I wasn't sure if that was a good idea. And then I had an idea to do that sample challenge where you send me some samples and I make music with it here today. But I was a bit late on that. Maybe we should prepare that a bit. So I figured that I would just make some beats. A cigarette lizard. I feel like a cigarette lizard today. I have my cigarettes here and beer. I don't smoke usually. Hey Guido, so nice to have you here also. I don't usually smoke, but I used to smoke when I was in this studio here in my grandmother's basement. I've been here for many years, making music in all sorts of states of mind. Hej Viktor. En svensk då antar jag. So it's very strange, you know. When I sit here and make music, I get such a craving for cigarettes. And these days, when I produce, I don't challenge myself to go against this urge. I just indulge myself so that I can just get into the mood a bit. I have enough shit in my daily life. So this is a bit of a relief. So now we're just relaxing here and drinking some beer. So what I figured I would do today is just make some beats with my wood samples. Perhaps play around a bit with my recorded sounds that I did in the forests. I don't know, maybe use the modular stuff I have on the computer also. We'll see. I mean, this is the first time we do this, so it's naturally it will have a few eye openers on how to do this in the best possible way. If you have any questions, requests, ideas, or anything, just write a comment and we will have a look at it together. I had an idea that maybe I should produce with my monitors for like 30 minutes or an hour or whatever comes natural, and then when I need a break I will answer questions. I think that could be a good idea, but we will start I will start by just making some beats, and maybe you will see some techniques that I use today that will inspire you or spark some questions on why I do that or how I did that, or if I could show how to do this or that thing, and we will give it a go. The way I'm producing and how I always been producing is that basically every project I opened, I try something new. So I don't really have a deep technique of anything. It's always experimentation, and that having experimented now for many years has helped me to experiment a bit. Maybe this session will be shit or not, but that's life, and that's why this is a live stream. This is not a lecture which I have planned, and it will be with a goal. We're just hanging out, making music, and we'll see where it leads. So we're a few here now. I guess I will turn off my microphone for a while, maybe. We'll see. And yeah, make some, or maybe not. Here are the way I can talk a bit about. This is my standard project. When I open Ableton, it looks like this, and I don't know if you know that, but you can save default uh, template. You go into here. Let's see. Where the hell do you do that? There is somewhere here. So what you can do is you set up your live set the way you want. Maybe you add a drum machine that you usually use, or synthesizer that you usually use, and return channels that you want to have. And you start by organizing everything you would like to have when you enter Ableton, almost like imagine you have your own studio, and you have your analog gear and everything is connected, and every time you step into your studio everything is connected the same way, and that is your starting point. And you can think about it in the same way with Ableton, where you arrange whatever it is you want to have as a starting point, and then you can go in here into preferences, file folder, and you can save that preset. It can also be a good idea to save preset projects, so that you can have different starting points. But then again, I usually for creativity I advise to have simple, just to have depends how you are as a person, of course. Me personally, I like to have as few options as possible, just to get going, and then the more I get into it, the more I allow myself to have more and more options. And yeah, exactly, Victor. It's also a good idea for, let's say you want to make an EP or an album. You can make one starting point, and then you use that starting point for 1 month, 2 months, and you always start it with the same sound, same synth, same effects. And then naturally you will have a consistent sounding array of tracks. You could have, but then of course it all depends on how many options you have with the template that you have chosen. Another idea to make, if you're still having issues with that, or if you want to try something, is to, let's say you make one track that you really like, the sounds are amazing, and the kick drum is sounding so nice, it's the best kick drum you ever made or whatever, and this track you save it, and then the next track you remix it. So you open up the same project, you delete all the arrangement, you delete all the clips, and then you can choose if you want to save the settings for each track. That can be a good idea, but just delete the arrangement, delete the midis and everything, and then you maybe start however you usually start, and you start maybe with the kick that you had in that great track, and then you use the same bass, and then you start altering them just to fit within the new idea that you have, that starts to grow once you approach it a bit differently. I don't know if you have heard my album Ether Mechanics. The first one is made like this. Each track is a remix of the one before. Oh yeah, that's good, Tifton. It works very well. Very well. The Ether Mechanics album, I did the first loop, which is the first track, and then the next track is a remix of the first, and I did 8 or 9 loops like that I really liked. So I made these loops in like 2 days, and then I felt that these loops would be a good foundation for a something. So I started with the first track, poured myself a cup of coffee in daylight or whatever, and I started with the arrangement. So I made crude arrangement of all 8 tracks, and then I went into them like in laps. So I did first track, did a rough arrangement, exported it, put it in my cell phone, walked for 30 minutes, my daily walk, listened to it. And then when I came back, I fixed all the little things that I thought about that I wanted to fix. And then I didn't get stuck on it. Went on to the second track, and usually it only takes like 1 or 2 hours if you're focused and if you watch the video I made on arrangement, just to get started with something basic and feel the sounds. Eventually you can arrange 1 or 2 tracks per day. So it took me about 1 week or so to arrange the album, and then I went into I usually sit for 2 hours per session, so I sit 2 hours just making details, and then 2 hours more, and then eventually I had a whole album that I listened to over and over when I went on my walks, and I took notes on how to improve them, and then eventually, of course, fixing the mix and all these things. Anyways, that's one advice for you. And I will talk more about that in my videos also. And of course, many of the things that I mention here today, I will be mentioning over and over in live sets, as not everyone will be here, and it's always good with repetition. And my hope is that we will spend time together for a considerable time, hopefully. Really learning together to make music. I mean, now when I approach this, I am a bit scared because I don't know what to do. I don't know what obstacles I will meet. That's the beauty of making music, and that's the feeling I have every time I enter. And now I have people here. Now I'm just trying to go about and see what happens. Yeah, if you have any questions about what I do, then I will try to answer them the best I can. But I think, yeah, I will go into my setup a bit. So the first channel I have here, I have a group for the low frequencies, which usually is then the kick and bass line, maybe some low mid frequencies that gives a movement to the bass or whatever, some rumbling kind of noise. It's good to have them in a group because you can add compression and saturation to the whole package to tie them together and make them kind of glued, which is a very good title here on the glue compressor. And then I have this kick rack, which is made from my birch wood samples that I recorded for my university thesis, which I'm not done with yet, by the way. I need to make a survey, which I guess at that point I didn't have anyone to send the survey, and now I have a whole community to help me out, I guess. But the idea was that I was studying the difference, and I'm sorry I'm ranting, by the way. I'll just rant because that's the natural thing for me, so I will just rant and do whatever comes natural to me during these streams. So what my thesis was about was that the difference between house music and techno. What's the difference? And can you use organic sounds to make techno music, which is a futuristic, very synthetic kind of music. So I used very irregular, rough organic sounds like birch wood scrapes and fire and jaw harp and my voice and all these very irregular sounds to make very regular, clean and synthetic music. And then the survey was supposed to ask the person who fill out the survey if they think it's house or techno. Yeah. So the sounds I have here are some kick kind of sounds. Sounds pretty cool. I also added some deeper stuff later. These are processed. The same kicks, only they are processed and resampled. Yeah. And then here in the hats, I have made hats with fire. I will play you the, if I increase the sustain and release here, let's see. Up. You see, it's just the hiss. So I made a recording of our stove where we heat the cabin in the woods with birch wood. So when the wood is a bit moist, it starts to hiss like this. So I recorded that, and I chose different segments to make different hats. And I used them just to short attack, and then the decay really. Let me see here. If I put pretty cool hi-hats. Just different. Some of them have some processing. Let's see here. Yeah, I have 2 return channels. One delay. And here I utilize what's known as the Haas effect. Let me write that in the chat. Let's see. The Haas effect. And the Haas effect is basically, it's a psychoacoustic phenomenon where we interpret a sound. If the delays between the ears are short enough, we interpret it as the same sound. So basically, if we put a very short delay between the left and right ear, it just sounds like one wide sound. And the longer the delay is, the more we experience it as a delay. And of course, if we have more transient, short bursting sounds like a hi-hat, the threshold for our ears is lower. So for instance, if you have a drone, you can push it pretty long and extreme, and we still can't really tell that it's 2 sounds. But with shorter sounds, you get a spread. And what I've done here, you see, it's so the left ear, it's played 1 millisecond after the original sound is played, and the right ear is 27 milliseconds. And then I have a slow modulation here that changes the time. Here you can change how much of these, this is basically like an LFO that changes these parameters. And also you can change how the filter is moving. So if you listen, you will hear that the stereo effect is changing. It's a pretty cool effect, I think. It's psychedelic. Then I think this is more a regular delay. Let's see. Yep. So that's that, and I will go through my return channels also before I begin. My first here, let me add a sound. Let's see. I have my jaw harp, and of course the legends. Those who subscribe with the legend tier, they can access all these sounds that I'm using. You get a download link, so you can download this, and this is constantly synced with Google Drive. So whenever I make changes or updates or anything, it's always updated. And when I add or delete also. So it's constantly changing. At least it will be. I haven't had much time to deal with that in the latest month or so, but I will do it. And here I have some jaw harp sounds. So let's play that, and we will listen to it with So my first reverb is by this is a very old. I will change these soon. I've been using these for about 1 year, and the first one is a big hall effect by the Native Instruments RC48. And then with Ableton's reverb, I have one that's a bit more crisp and high. So together. Hello, Pablo. Welcome. Yeah, and then lately I've been using the little plate a lot. It's amazing reverb. It's some low cut so that I can use it a lot. And then I have a delay. Ableton's regular delay. And then I have an echo, a more vintage tape-like delay effect. Yeah, Birds of Paradise, David, he uses the harmonica now and then. It's a very cool instrument to use with reamping, where you send it through a guitar amp with a microphone and process it through like guitar or bass pedal rigs. You can make really sick drones and noise music. I've never used it on the Infinite actually, but maybe we will do it today just to see what we can do with it. But yeah, we will try to make some beats then. Maybe it will be horrible, maybe not. I will just turn off the microphone for a little while. If you have any questions, you can just write, and I will go about making some beats and see where these sound. Or maybe I will add this now, because that will affect your... Usually I have this SonarWorks reference. It's a very cool... it makes these kind of profiles for different headphones. So for instance, now I'm using the Beyerdynamic DT 770 Pro 250 ohm. So they kind of correct the coloration of my headphones. And then you have a lot of different profiles for different headphones. It's a great plugin, and you can buy your headphones like individually calibrated from Sonarworks directly, and then you get a custom template for your specific headphone, which has like a 0.5 decibel accuracy, so it should be theoretically super flat. I haven't done that myself because I found that out after I bought my last pair of headphones. But the next time I buy a pair, I will definitely give that a try. And I recommend you to do it, even though I haven't done it myself. And if you try, please let me know if you like it or not. But yeah, we'll see what sounds we find here. Okay, sorry guys, I thought I muted the microphone. I don't really know how to. Okay, well, I will just keep it on then so that I hear whatever you're hearing. Maybe I will turn it down. Let's see. Yeah, maybe like that. put in the utility after this because we will have a stereo effect. So here I put the bass in mono, and if I modulate the stereo, it will put the bass in stereo again. This. Let's see. This little devil. It's the latest version of the spellbook. Let's see. And I want it to be here somewhere. Interesting. And let's see the sustain. We can make it go faster, I think. Here. useful thing to do when you really make a return channel custom. Now I made it to this 16th note. Sometimes it's fun to bring in other elements that aren't made for it, like even now we can't route the kick there, but you get the idea. Let's see. inspelningen innan är bakom huset. Just random stuff like that.
Men jag förstår liksom inte, är det...
A lot of side chaining today, apparently. Sure, I will come to that, Victor. Let's see. I wonder if I can use my mic here. Maybe I have. Let me check. Yeah, I'm using the internal sound card right now, so I can't use the mic for the project, unfortunately. Okay, well, I use the glue compressor mainly actually because it's able to do what I want with a compressor most of the time. I mean, these settings for the attack and the release usually make me find the right pumping that I want from a compressor, and these ratios are nice. And also the glue compressor is modeled after a analog desk compressor, so it has some saturation and some saturation basically, a more analog kind of that gives some harmonics, it gives a character. It's not as clean as the regular compressor, which is a more digital transparent compressor. And also this interface, for me, it's I don't like it that much. I like to work with the old way. and it's nice. It has the soft clipping. I don't think it has soft clipping in the regular one, but I'm not sure. Maybe you can correct me on that. And for those of you who don't know soft clipping, it's a analog. Again, it's an analog kind of. It's an analog phenomenon, basically. When you clip sound on tape or through circuits, the distortion is rounder. This takes us into sound theory, basically. I don't know if you know how harmonics work, for instance. I don't know why they show me that every time I load a plugin, but I will give a demonstration, because maybe not everyone, it's not really intuitive, the thing with harmonics. So basically, when you have a waveform that's even, like a sine wave, you have only one tone. Let me play it. So it's only one tone. I will show you a where do I have the spectrum? You see, you have some here, but this is the tone. Can I? Yeah. So here I can change it from a sine wave to a triangle and ramp and a square, and you introduce harmonics. You see here the harmonics. So let's see. This is a 260. Yeah, so you introduce more and more harmonics. So basically, when you have a smooth sine wave like this, I will make a video actually where I explain the basics of sound, because it's, like I said, it's not the most intuitive thing, and it's mind-blowing once you really understand like what this sine wave actually means when it comes to the air that's in your room and the air that hits your ears, and what the connection is. But basically, the principle is that here, when it's high, you have a higher density of air molecules, and then the density of the air molecules goes down here, where it's very far between the air molecules, and the harder you compress the waves. For instance, here you have a lot of compression, and then it's empty. There's no air. So basically, you can see how the membrane of the speaker is pushing the sound softly, and it goes back softly, and then it goes a bit faster up, faster down, and then it goes fast, and then zoom, just pulls it back. And the more of this effect, the more overtones you get, or harmonics, the way you saw on the spectrum. So clipping is basically when you push this sound wave through a mixer, and the sound wave is cut by the zero line. It gets flat because it can't go further up, which means that you get a flat curve, and that means flat, you get more overtones. And when you do that digitally, you get a nasty effect that is not musical and sounds distorted in a bad way usually. But when you do it through analog gear, it works differently. It's not the flat stop. It's a bit rounder, so you get a bit of roundness on the saturation and the distortion, which is more musical to your ears. And there are some digital attempts at recreating this. So you can do the soft clipping here. It's called hard clipping when it's done without finesse, when it's just over the top, like in a if you're clipping here on the master, for instance. But if you use soft clipping, you smoothen out the saturation and get a more musical result. Yeah, and that's why, for instance, people, when they record to tape or send it really hot, like really loud on an analog mixing desk, you can get a really cool, saturated, distorted effect that sounds good. And here they use different kind of equations or algorithms to try to emulate this sound. This is a pretty advanced and complex matter. I don't think they really understand completely how it works, but they have different algorithms. I'm not a mathematician or anything. I just know that they try to figure out and make these kind of analog sounding soft clipping in the digital domain by sending the digital information through different algorithms that makes the clipping sound more analog and musical. And that's one of the reasons why I use the glue compressor, because it's the analog kind of modeled compressor in Ableton, and they have this in many of their range of devices. For instance, you have these. They have 3 EQs, and this is the same thing here. They have the EQ8, which is the digital clean equalizer, which doesn't color the sound. And then you have the EQ3, which is modeled after a DJ mixer, like a Pioneer. So here in the digital era, we use these kind of EQs. We want to have the parametric bands and many different bands that we can choose from. And then on a DJ mixer, usually we have 3 bands, and they go from infinite kill, so that's completely silent, and only +6, because usually when we mix finished tracks, we don't have to use a lot of boosting to shape the sounds that we are mixing. But when we are using EQs in the studio environment, we want to have more radical boosts to be able to shape the sounds. So it's +15, -15, which is a common analog range. And why they chose an analog range here is probably because that's the standard. It's been the standard since they basically invented equalizers in the 50s, or whenever it started to become popular. It's very common to have +15, -18, +15, -15. That's like the standard in music gear. And then they have the channel EQ, which is based on a mixing desk. So like the channel strip of mixing desks, let's say it has three parameters. You have the low, mid, high, and the mid range is parametric, where you can scan where it should affect the sound. And then you have a high pass filter at, I think, 80 dB. I think, let's see if they have any information here. Yeah, 80 hertz, sorry. And then we have a low shelf filter at 100 hertz. Yeah, 100. Which is also common in professional analog mixers, to have a shelving on the low. And on the high, they have a combination of a low pass filter and a high shelving filter, which is also common in analog. And then you have a little trim, kind of gain a knob. And also I've been planning to make videos introducing some of the fun facts on Ableton's effects, because I think they're often overlooked. I use them quite a lot, and the ones I don't use, I plan to start using more, just to have something fun to learn and to encourage the people who follow my Patreon to not feel that they have to buy external plugins to get cool effects. I mean, they have a lot of distortion plugins, like I said, EQ, compressors, reverb. The reverb is amazing if you know how to use it. And yeah, we've been standing for an hour now, so I think I will just we'll take just a few minutes break. I need to go to the bathroom, and I will be back in like 1 or 2 minutes. All right. If you have any more questions, then just write it, and I will be back very soon. Right. Okay. Let's see where we can take it from here. I'm using much more reverb now than I usually do. I think part of it because the process of making this is not as enjoyable to watch otherwise. these vocal samples. This is from the January new moon, and most of my recordings, I divide my productions into different parts usually, especially now when we have all of you here, and I mean, it would be a separate session just focusing on getting cool sounds, and that can take a whole night. So we will explore some old recordings that I've made, and usually that's how I work also. And here, like I said, this is a recording of a new moon ritual that I had. I am during that evening. It was just me in the forest where I lived at that time. I spent the entire evening just with the lights out and the microphone, and exploring my voice, basically. Feeling the vibrations through my body, and not really caring about how it sounds or what it can be used for or anything like that, just to make sounds and explore what my throat can do, which results in pretty eccentric sounds.
Oh.
I mean, these are sounds that when I hear them, it gets my pulse up. I mean, it's completely crazy. Of course, I separate myself from it a lot, even though I did that and I have that somewhere inside me. And I look at it at a sober kind of mindset afterwards, and just see myself as a kind of curator or caretaker of that very crazy individual, where it's like a singer in a rock band or whatever, some crazy guy that you don't really want to be friends with, or you don't want to be in a relationship with him, but you're happy that he's in your band by the mic and just really ripping it. I guess there's something to that. And afterwards I come into like office hours where I go into these recordings and find interesting parts. I process them, use noise cancellation, compression, EQing to make them ready to use quickly in a production setting. These are just the raw recordings. But we can see maybe if we find something that's interesting. Okay, let's see. Why not? This lower. This is a pretty cool effect by, let's see, Sound Toys, Alter Boy. My computer is shit. Look at my CPU. This will like crash soon. I already bought a new computer. It comes in the end of the month. But yeah, whatever. Usually I would bounce these, but I think it would take too much time. Let me check. see if I can crop this. I crop it to have a smaller file, and then I try to freeze it. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. And yeah, like you see, my processor, I have a 2-core processor, so I can't really handle a lot of effects on different channels. It just after, I mean, now we've been talking a lot, but basically I've been producing for 30 minutes, and already my computer is peaking. It's a big problem, and it has also shaped my sound, because over the past years I haven't been able to make music with more than like 12 channels basically. So I've had to have a minimal kind of approach, which is also a good thing because it shapes the sound. And yeah, Alter Boy is an amazing plugin for detuning and transposing sound. Really, I recommend to check it out. What I did here, I freezed the track so that all these effects, it won't help anything because basically because these effects, oh shit, because this is also sidechain, so I can't even use that. Whatever. But what you can do, you freeze it and then you flatten it, and it will burn the effects into the sound. Like this, perhaps. No, whatever. And one of the secrets, or not secrets, but one of the contributing parts to the Ntogn sound is field recordings. Almost all Ntogn tracks are made almost entirely of recorded sounds, like stuff from the forest or whatever. There's no synthesis, basically, not much melody. I have experimented with it a bit because I haven't always understood what the core of the project is. Now I'm starting to understand it, and I understood it last year. So when I made the Utopia EP, I deliberately introduced my modular into this cosmos, where I blended all the atmospheric field recorded sounds with the synthetic sound as a way to introduce something new into the project, which gave a pretty cool result, but it felt to me a bit like a gimmick also. Like it only proved what Ntogn really is, and that is this kind of raw organic sounds. And I realized then that I really had to make a new moniker for the synthesis music, so that's why I made the Ether Mechanics, which is on the contrary, it's almost only modular sounds. With some recordings from some factories where I have visited. I recorded their machines. Let me check if I can find some of it. Yep. These kind of things. I followed this factory on Instagram, and they recorded their old machines from the 50s. And I really loved the sounds. Listen to this. It's like a drum loop. I have made a new appointment. These are from 2015, these recordings. And I remember I went there with this shitty recorder, and the guy who worked there couldn't stop talking, and I just thought, oh, whatever, I will be able to edit it. And then when I came home and I had the material, and he was like talking on all the good parts, so I couldn't use it, and my recording was a bit shit because I didn't bring headphones, so I couldn't listen to what I was doing. So now I will go back there after this pandemic, bring proper studio microphones, and tell this guy to shut up. And I will make some new recordings of this, and of course I will share it with the eligible tiers, all the recordings, and they will be the foundation of my next Ether Mechanics album, together with my modular sounds. But okay, let's see if we can take this track any further. Ooh. Yeah, wait, let's see. I have this. Where is that effect? Here, here, here. Okay, my computer will die. See all the peaks here, and we have a processing. Maybe you want to see the processing of this one. Why not? We have time. We have time. It's the original. You can hear the artifacts there. It's kind of sounding a bit strange. We can use the complex, it's better for that. Yeah, it's more smooth. You can hear the pitched it down. This is one of my favorite reverbs. I don't like to promote external plugins, and I noticed I do it anyways, but this reverb is like the reverb. I mean, it gives me... It has such a nice roomy sound. This is an algorithmic reverb, so it's like one algorithm that you manipulate in different ways. So it's not like a bank of different halls and blah blah blah. It's just one algorithm. There's like one room that you can manipulate in different ways. You can change basically you change the placement of the microphone and the texture of the room and the size of the room and these kind of things. We can explore it a bit now. Let's see. So basically, this is like the distance from the sound. No, not really. No, more like a balance of the early reflections and reverb, of course, yeah. The only shit about this one is that they... Fuck. The bad thing about this reverb is that it doesn't have a low cut. I don't understand why they don't have a low cut, because it's a bit frustrating. Let's see. Timbre. You have a high cut. Could it be cool to do... what the fuck is that? What happens if we... This is pretty cool. Oh yeah, I have so many things I want to tell you about this. For those of you who don't know, you can automate the parameters within third-party plugins also. I just assume that everyone watching don't know everything, so we just cover even basic things. This little arrow ding, and you see all the parameters within the plugin. So for instance, I want to use automate the high cut. Is this one? I can automate it here. Let's see. X right, yes. And this is pretty cool with this. I can make it go slow, and then I spin it, and it will have some problems with keeping up. Let's see. I find that a bit hypnotic. Yeah. one is moving now also. Then I have some compression. I put it before the reverb. I don't know why I have it before. I used to use the Native Instruments compressors a lot before I realized that I can do the same thing with the glue compressor. Basically, it's not exactly the same thing. I still miss this one. Wait. This is a emulation of the classic Universal Audio LA2A Teletronics compressor, which is an optical compressor. It's like my favorite compressors in the whole wide world. It has a pretty slow attack time, so really fast like drum sounds, hi-hats and percussions aren't really good for it. But on bass and drones and vocals, it's so transparent and amazing. One of the key features of this compressor is that it has a variable release time. It can go up to 2 seconds, and it depends on the incoming signal. So you see, there aren't many parameters which I like when it comes to effects. And the way it used to work, basically before, like in the 50s and 60s, they used, electronic equipment to try to convert audio into different kind of electric currents and other sorts of physical phenomenon which they could manipulate. So there are different kind of compressors, different kind of equalizers and effects which all use these circuits and different mechanics to get different happenings basically within the effects box. And this is an optical compressor. Which means that when the sound comes into the compressor, it lights a light bulb inside the compressor. So the louder the signal, the brighter the little light bulb shines. And then there is a light sensitive sensor next to the light bulb, which alters the gain reduction. So the more you pump the gain in, the more the reduction will happen, because the brighter the light bulb gets, the more the volume will go down afterwards. And that's interesting because in a light bulb you have a natural kind of behavior. If you have a regular old light bulb, for instance, you know that if you turn it off, it doesn't just go off like that. It glows a bit and then it dies as the energy dissipates from the wires. I don't know if this one has wires, but anyway, just to explain the how it works. So that gives, also it has a reaction time when the signal comes in. It takes a while for the light bulb to react, which gives the slower attack time of the compressor. And this is a very transparent and musical compressor. The original Telectronics LA2A, I think they cost like 4,000 euros or something. But there are emulations of it that like Warm Audio, which is like like 600 or 700 euros or something. I don't know exactly. But yeah, that can be interesting to know, I guess. And here I use it on this vocal because it's well, this is an effect chain that I use for vocals to create this kind of weird diabolic sound. And let's check. So even though it compressed so much, it's so transparent. You see, it's working so hard, you can't even tell there's a compressor on there. And then of course, little plate. And while I'm just ranting on about how they used to do things, I might as well explain the plate reverb. Many of you here might know Birds of Paradise, and he's a real genius when it comes to these things. He has built plate reverbs from car hoods. He has taken car hoods from old cars, I don't know, maybe from the scrapyard or wherever, where you have this big plate that covers the engine, and he puts a kind of not a speaker but a resonator in one end that makes the plate start to reverberate and vibrate, and then he has a contact microphone on the other end, which makes a plate reverb, because back in the days, as I said, they tried to make these things in a natural way. For instance, like Abbey Road and all the really big recording studios, they had buildings for reverbs. I mean, there weren't any reverb effects anywhere. So what they did, and this is ridiculous. I mean, if you don't, I mean, when I heard it for the first time, at least, it was like, what? So basically, you imagine a barn, like a really big empty warehouse, and they put a loudspeaker in one end and a microphone in the other end. So let's say the Beatles were recording a track, and they wanted some reverb on Paul McCartney's vocals. What they did then, they routed the vocal to the loudspeaker in this warehouse, and they recorded the reverb of the microphone within this room, and then they blended this signal into the console. And that's how they made reverb in the 50s and 60s and probably 70s. And they, of course, experimented with a lot of different rooms to make this. There are some famous examples where they record. They did this just in like the staircase of the complex. They just put a loudspeaker on the top of the stairs, and they put a microphone at the bottom, and then they just play the vocals there, and then they blend it to make the reverb. And then also, this is a famous thing for Abbey Road Studios. I don't know if they were the first ones, but I think their plate reverbs are rather famous. And what they did was exactly the same thing as Birds of Paradise did with the car hoods, only a bit more sophisticated. They had different plates, literally like pieces of metal, big sheets of metal, where they had a resonator in one end and a contact microphone in the other end. And then they routed the signal from their desks to this plate and send the signal through it, and they used it on guitars and vocals and stuff. And then they had big rooms. I mean, these were huge plates, like an apartment, not a small apartment, maybe. I don't know. It depends how you live. And then they have different materials. I don't know exactly which one they use, but let's say they had one in tin, one in copper, and but that's not just to get an idea. And all this kind of different thickness of the plates also give different sounds. And then they have different parameters where they can manually twist to make different alterations to the plate to alter the reverb, which is pretty cool. And here we have an emulation of a plate reverb, which they had taken to the next level. And it's cool. Like I said, it's just a few parameters. You have the reverb length, dry wet knob, and a low cut, and a kind of phaser, kind of like modulation. We will listen. This won't work as well now because I have a very slow modulation here, which means that it takes a very long time before this whole modulations to go one lap, like basically maybe 1 or 2 minutes. But just for the this session, I will freeze it anyways, which means it will only record part of this, and then it will repeat that little part. So let's see, just so that you can see though, I want you to see the WAV file. This is the original. Yeah, and then we flatten, because now what's happened is that during that processing, Ableton recorded this sound played through the effects, and it has created a temporary audio file which it plays instead of the original through the effects, which has to be processed through the processor. So what we can do then is flatten this, and you see the result is very different. The transient has been smoothened by the compressor, and the reverb, and you see all the decays are very different. And that, see here, when I crop it, you see there are no effects left, so it's only now playing the audio file without the processing. So it's more easy on the processor, and enables you and me to get further with our projects without our compressor telling us no. Maybe we had a bit too much reverb there. freeze it again. Flatten, and that's an important part, to not be afraid to commit to what you have done. It's a process, forward. Don't be afraid to not be able to go back and change something. I think that's an important part of music production in general. I mean, I am one of the things that's a challenge for me in this Patreon thing is that I am figuring out how to translate my knowledge in music production, like traditional music production, which is recording with microphones, using microphones and musicians' instruments, which is a completely different mentality, really, than working digitally. And I'm trying to save all the nuggets and golden parts of it to transfer that to the electronic music community, where I think it can enhance. And one of the things is committing to something. For instance, when you are making a recording of a vocalist, today people they don't use compressors, for instance, on the recording, because they would think that, oh, maybe we want to change that or this afterwards, maybe this and that. But if you just commit to it, trust your ears and your and the flow, and just at least to me, and at least to me, I noticed that it's very rare that I ever think that, oh, well, fuck, I wish I could go back. It's more just moving forward and keeping. I mean, eventually you will develop a sense of what to keep and not. And here it's more like what I can keep, because a lot of these things are side chained, so I can't really commit to them. Let's say this one, for instance. Here I have this one, so I can't freeze this because it's working against the MIDI or audio signal that comes from this track. What I can do then, for instance, let's say I save this here. I usually set the date, and I have a preset here, and then I just delete this, and then I freeze this, flatten, and I put it. And I have to route it again. So it's the same, but it has the effects burnt into it. Some saturation on this. While we're at it, we might just have a look at another cool effect to waste your money. Soft tube. One of my favorite VST produced soft tube. Maybe it's because I'm Swedish and they're Swedish. I don't know. But let's see. tighter. You see, the low end just comes together a bit, and the high mids a bit more accentuated. I notice the volume is a bit low, but maybe I should keep it. Wait, I will. Whatever, I will keep it like that. So what more do we have? Okay, we will try to add a birch scrape bass line. See here, it's just scrapes from birchwood. I can play you some examples because I made tracks with these sounds. I made an EP actually that I will release. Okay, let's see if I can. This might be loud. Up. Here. All the kicks are made with these wood samples. You hear it here, especially in this track. So let's see if we can add. I mean, this kick is already very deep, so we just add a bit. Okay, maybe that one. Let's see. Put it in rhythm. Just to give some groove to the beat. I mean, this doesn't sound optimal, but you get the idea. We can process it, perhaps. Let's see. And those of you who don't know, on the EQ8, some of the critique on this plugin is that it's a bit not intuitive. I mean, I have the ozone, the neutron, What I used to use was this, of course, classic. Oops. Okay, I need to fix that. But then I had the neutron equalizer. I used to use the fab filter, and then I started using this stuff. Why is it not working? Up. That's why. Much more responsive, I think. And you can connect all the equalizers in your project and make them work interconnectedly, which is really cool. But my processor is not good enough to use that, so I use this one now, and it works properly. What you can do is actually just hold Alt and you click, and you can change the Q value. And this is like one of the main reasons I think that many are afraid to use the EQ8 because it's not intuitive. They think they have to do this and like, where do you have, which one is it? Is it? Oh wait, it's like four is here and that. But you can just grab any one and hold Alt and change it. And they even have this scale key, which is really cool. We can try use it here maybe. Let's see. Again, let's use the spell book to do some shenanigans. See, we can map it to the scale. And we can do some parallel compression perhaps. Let's see. What can we do? We can use the glue compressor, the saturator, soft clipping. Up. Am I on the right? Oh yeah, right. Pedal to add some lows. Add some rumble in the low end. For live performance, this track would work pretty well for, yeah. add some texture. And a good thing to know about these, for those who don't know, these are the slopes of the filters. So it attenuates 12 decibels per octave or 24 decibels per octave. And the 24 decibels per octave introduces usually a bit of distortion. So it's a bit more analog kind of sound, and it takes a bit more of the processing power of your computer. It's a recording of me eating psychedelic mushrooms in the forest. Snap, but I only want the snap, so I filter. Bit more snap there on the kick. Show you nothing now. Let's see here. It's a fun thing that I do sometimes, and it will look cool. See the erosion, and I will bring in the spellbook again. See if I map this here and this here. You see this shape start to emerge. There'll be the pentagram. Have the pentagram appearing. Start spinning it. Whoa, whoa. What's going on? Whoa. Again, just working with a few. I mean, look, we only have 8 channels now, so. those weren't the best ones. I have some recordings here from my jam with Dorisbury, and I have some maybe some hats. Oops, fuck. Yeah. Oh, nice, Pablo. Erosion is a really cool tool. And a cool thing, if you have a static recording like this, is the what the fuck? What's it called? The beat repeats. Yeah, the Mimeophone. It's an amazing module. I made Alex buy it. I think I will buy it. I don't have. I can't afford one right now, but yeah, it's. I'm thinking to buy it for. Yeah, I really need that in my modular. That sounds horrible. Okay, yeah, it's not going. We need to do this. Nice, easier. Yeah, well, I guess that's this loop. To take it anywhere from here would require some time, some noodling, but to get a quick sketch, I mean, we've been producing now for like 1.5 hour max. So, I mean, it's basically a track. I mean, we could arrange this for 6 minutes and have an interesting kind of track. And then adding, I think, arranging this, doing some kind of interesting things in the arrangement to keep the interest going, would be a decent track to just export and listen to for a while, and then after that add maybe two, three, four more elements, like an atmosphere or whatever, like more perks and maybe more fun kind of lead element that brings your attention. Um, but I think for this video or this live stream, maybe this is pretty cool. Yeah. And one thing I came to think of when I use this compressor is a rule that's good to know when you're using compressors. One of the things, especially when you're working with bands, of course, which is not relevant that often to electronic music. Like here in this session, this is like an Ntogn session where I work with audio and recorded sounds, so it's a bit different approach than when you work with synthesis. But it can be the same thing when you work with analog recordings, because then it still is they're raw recordings. But when you're using MIDI in a project, you have control of everything. So you don't have to use compressors in the same way and limiters. You can tweak the envelopes, filters, and all these kind of things to make it sit well in the mix without even using equalizers or compressors. But when you have raw recordings like a very eccentric madman screaming into a microphone, or just a recording of a modular rumble kind of weird thing, you might have to use compressors and equalizers more. And a good rule of thumb when you're working with compressors, of course, the attack time sets how much of the transients you want to keep. So for instance, if you have a kick drum, you want to have the punch through the compressor, and then the compressor comes in on the tail to just keep the rumble and the tactile feeling of the kick. And you can shape that with the compressor. I will make a video on this specifically. And the release time, it's good to have it pumping with your track. So there are usually two rules of thumb when you work with a compressor. Is either you have the release time pumping with your track, so it's pumping with either the BPM or whatever rhythm the instrument is playing, so that the attack is musical. For instance, if you have a drum loop where someone is playing with the drums, if you have the release time going not in the same rhythm as the drum, it will sound off beat basically. So you want the release time to go down in rhythm with your drum. And then also for the ratio, how do you pick the ratio? One thing to think about is that you set the compressor to pump evenly. You don't want it to be surprised and suddenly just fly here and fly there. You want it to have a regular pumping kind of movement to work it evenly. This is how you make compression sound transparent. What you can even do is you can use multiple compressors. I don't know if I have a good example. Let's see, maybe I have a loop here or something. Maybe here. see there, it tightens up the can you hear the hope you're I guess everyone is wearing headphones so you can hear it. The low end of the drum is a bit loose now. It's like floating. It's like you just pick up that final thing, and the ratio, a good rule of thumb when you set the ratio is that the how do you say, the anomaly of the peaks. For instance, if you this loop is pretty even, so the amount of compression can be a bit lower. If you have a recording that's pretty even, and then you have some sounds here and there that are higher, you can use a higher ratio to have still a natural kind of a natural sound. And it's worth mentioning that a limiter, oops, not looper, the only difference really in technical terms or whatever kind of terms between a limiter and a compressor is the ratio. So in professional production, when you talk about limiters and compressors, a compressor becomes a limiter at 10:1 ratio. So this now set to 10 here, this is what is called a limiter. Then of course this one has a different kind of different effect. You see, you don't have an attack, and you have the look ahead, which is a very cool feature. I think I will start wrapping this up now, but the Ableton limiter is actually a really good limiter that works for even mastering whatever. And the look ahead is a cool digital feature which is not available in analog gear really. This is where it analyzes the sounds before they actually come into the limiter, so it's prepares itself for the signal that's coming in, which makes it even more transparent. And you can set it to 6 milliseconds, which it affects your processor a bit more, but it gives a more smooth, it works smoother. And this can be good to use on your master channel if you want to make a master mix. And actually we will do a master of this track, and I will show you how I go about making like an export when I made a loop like this. But first I have to go to the bathroom again, so we'll see how many are still here. I will be back in 2 minutes, and I will play this loop until I come back. You will listen to it for 2 dreadful minutes. See you then. Wait, I just need to listen before I put it. The only downside with showing you the mastering chain that I usually do is that I usually use the isotope ozone, which is not a plugin that most people have. Let's see here. There are several ways of doing it, and there are tools. I want. This is nice to have this live stream. The first one. I'm really like figuring out how to do this. I mean, I have no idea that I would be talking this much when I start this. I figured out I would just make music and maybe say hello now and then. But basically, I mean, what I've been showing you today is really a lot of the core ideas of equalizing, compression, saturation, sound theory. I will go into these things in separate videos, of course, but I really have noticed now when I make this that only being in this session here should give quite a lot of insight into a lot of things that will be very helpful for you when you make your music. And I don't know if you have seen that, but one of my ambitions that I've been thinking with Patreon is that eventually we will make a record label together. I think it's a natural step for this endeavor where we share music that we do and we get feedback from friends in this community on how we can improve it and what they think. We have the recorded videos to really zoom in on different areas of sound design and music production. We have these live streams to enable you guys to ask questions, see in action where these things that I talk about are used. Working like this from scratch is one thing, but I will also open projects that are more finished, and we will go into the details. And of course, all the sounds that I'm using in these videos are able for you. You can download them. Depends on your tier, of course. The wizards, they can download my modular file, my modular folder, and the legends can download my entire library. But my ambition is that eventually I will come to a more detailed solution where you can choose how much you want, what you want, and I mean, this is. I mean, I worked for months to make these sounds, so that's why I charge a bit for you to use them. And of course, a lot of them is. A lot of you want to use your own samples, and that's fine. I will also offer like tutoring on mixing. For instance, we have one individual who signed up for the Dragon tier, and we have been. And this person sent me his music, and we have been making streams like this one-on-one with his project, and we have been going through the processing and how to arrange it and how to change some sounds and giving some ideas on how to improve it. And my idea is that when we have all of these things gathered together, we have a community with feedback, we have the tutoring on the mixing on individual tracks, we give samples if people want some samples to play with. I give advice on how to produce sound design. I give sound theory and all these things to help everyone to get a boost in their music production. I want to give information that I wish I had when I started. And I think in time, I mean, we only been doing this for 2 months. I think by paying attention to these things and the whole concept will make everyone involved grow a lot in their productions. And a natural step from that, I think, would be to start making music together and release it together. So that's my ambition, that we will start a label. We will, I don't know how we will do it. Maybe we will have some sort of interactive, even either live streams or chats on Discord, or directly in Patreon to like choose the artworks or the name of the label, and we will curate the tracks and we will make releases, and I will show you how I distribute it, how we can start the label together. I will show you how to start a label, how to manage a label if you want to do that. And yeah, we will upload it to Spotify, Bandcamp, and iTunes, and everything. We will maybe master it together also in sessions like these. Maybe we make a various artist release with a lot of tracks from people from the community, and we will make mastering sessions where we fix it, and we will release it together. I mean, I think that eventually will send a message to the community outside that it's not an endeavor reserved for the elite, where label managers pick that and this and that. We can, as a community, we can create something that really reverberates across people who are open-minded to hear some new stuff. I think that's I'm very excited about that, and I never really thought that it would be possible, but already we are 120 Patreons, and I think at maybe 200 or something like that, we can start looking at this already. I'm having my eyes out on the Discord feedback room about tracks that could be potentially used for such a release, and I think that it will be a great project to have together. A really nice opportunity for everyone here to really give honest feedback on each other's music and really get like involved in the material and the label and the sound and everything, and how they can contribute to grow. Like, yeah, I'm very excited about that. I mean, that's the way I run Hypnus, basically. So we are 6 people, basically, right now, 6 or 7, who just feedback and talk about every release together and blah. It's just so much fun, you know? Thank you. Yeah, thanks, guys, and thanks for being here. You know, this is it's so much fun, I think. So what I do basically for there are some different and just to show that there are tools. That's great, Damien. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of. I mean, I grew up without a musical background. I had no friends that played music, no friends who played instruments. No one cared about music production, and I always wanted to do it. And something that I realized when I got my first high tier Patreon, which we became friends and we talked a bit about it. And this guy, he's from a town that where he doesn't know anyone who makes music, or take it seriously or see it the way he does or whatever. And then he told me that giving this opportunity to just enter somewhere where he could just immediately have so many friends that had exactly the same interest, that really opened my eyes to what this could become, because that's exactly what I'm looking for. You know, I don't have any friends where I come from. Most of my friends are well, most are dead, but if they're not, they're junkies and they don't care much about music. And finding through SoundCloud in the old days, like 8 years ago, finding Luigi and Corridor and all these individuals through the internet really connected me with people who I could relate to, and I took my chance to connect them and keep them as a community to have that sense of belonging to something. And yeah, that's was really motivating to me to try to establish something like that, something where people who are spread around the world and want to find like a community and clear path what they want to create, and that's what we will do together. And one thing about mastering is well, in short, the difference between mixing and mastering is that mastering is a more. I mean, basically, it's the same thing, only a much more subtle mastering. Usually, you have only the stereo export, of course, but you can do the mixing yourself, you can do the mastering yourself. The downside with that is that you have to change the mindset, and I will talk about the mindset a lot when we talk about music, because the mindset is very important. I've said it many times, and I will say it many times more, that listening with different mindset is as important as listening with different monitoring, because listening with different attention to different things and having different functions in your life makes you listen differently, and your music will perhaps be listened to in different circumstances. And mastering is basically just listening with a different mindset, which is why I still send my music for mastering, because I have heard the track so many times. All the kicks, all the bass lines, and all the sounds, I already heard them, and I already did my best at putting them in a way that I feel is good. Of course, I can wait like 1 month, listen to it again with fresh ears, which can work, absolutely. But usually, maybe you don't want to wait 1 month, and usually you want to give it to someone with a different kind of ear and skill than what you have. And then basically, the fundamental of mastering really is getting the low and high frequency in balance. That's basically mastering. There are some details in it, like some technical small things also, like really in the detail of in the mid range, making some small cuts here and there. This really small thing, but like in the bigger concept of the whole thing, it's about having the bass and the highs sounding in a balance, which is according to some sort of standard. So let's say you are mastering a deep techno track. It usually has more bass than a techno track, and it has more bass than, let's say, a house track. And just as a deep house track has more bass than a house track. So when you send it for mastering, they make sure that your low end is it's deep, but not too deep to sound dull. It's full, but still you have a lot enough top. But if you would master a deep techno track with a pop music approach, you will cut a lot of the lows, you will lower the bass a lot and really pump up the high frequencies, and it will sound horrible because it's not built to sound like that. And a good method for getting your mix and your master sounding good is to have, I've also said this before, is to have someone else in the room, especially someone who knows music, because that really makes you nervous, you know. If you have your EP, you bring a friend over in your studio and you just have them sit on the couch next to you and you listen to the whole EP. It doesn't matter if they're listening, if they're sitting with their phone, or just have them in the room and urging yourself to become more self-aware and nervous and critical about the material. That will provoke you to think differently about it than when you're by yourself and nothing matters. Because when it comes to when everything is done, that person will hear the final master, and all of his friends and all of your friends and everyone will hear it. So it's good to break out of that. With that said, of course, you shouldn't be too self-critical either. I mean, it's also a value of just getting your music out there and just having done something and moving on, and so it's a balance. Just like you're mixing your frequencies, you need to mix your self-awareness, kind of. And there are, yeah. And one tool that I use, I used to use it a lot, at least, is the ozone. It has a pretty cool functions where it helps you intelligently to make a master which can be interesting. I don't know if I have a track that could be really representative of this. Okay, I think I deleted like most of my music library. Let me see if I can find a track that could be used as a reference to this. Let me check. I have just a few tracks here. I don't listen a lot to music these days. I mean, I only listen to my music, your music, and my friends' tracks, and then I listen to like metal music on Spotify and ambient music. I don't really download stuff anymore from the scene. Okay, why is this taking so long? Wait, let me check. Even if we pull up a bad example, at least we'll show the method. Okay, let's listen to our track. Okay, yeah. Okay, well, let's choose this track, for instance. Benjamin. It's good to pick a track by an artist that you really enjoy. Let's see. I mean, if you pick a track by a producer who can't produce, then you will have a poor sounding mix. But Benjamin at least knows a bit or two. Now I'm using an MP3, which is a horrible example. Like I said, I don't use these tracks more than for really unofficial purposes. Otherwise, I would of course use a WAV file, and not specifically because a WAV file is sounding so much better. I don't know if you ever tried it yourself, but I tried once to there are websites where you can do blind tests between WAV files and 320 MP3 and 128 MP3, and you should pick the WAV file. And it's hard. It's really hard to pick which one. But the reason for why using WAV file is better is because that's usually the original recording. There are a lot of things that can happen to a MP3 along the way. They can have the volume changed, and the compression can be different, and of course the some sort of quality reduction can also affect the sound. But there is a A/B testing, which is a very good thing to mix, which can be done here in the O zone automatically. So it analyzes this Benjamin Sensei track. We can perhaps check with this here. Let's see, tonal balance control. And again, let's see, we can make a here create custom target curve. For instance, let's say we take this track, it analyzes it. A lot of bass, horrible example, but then we can play our track. You can see that the bass is a bit too much. Okay, let's see, maybe we can add some here with this one. Let's just see what happens. This is not... Yeah, actually sounded better. Some presets here, which can be fun to check. Okay, my computer is collapsing. Let's see. Okay. Up. The fuck? Wait. Okay, now. Close this. Yeah. For instance, here I made previously I made some presets where I picked my favorite tracks from different producers, and I loaded them all into this plugin to make a kind of presets, or how do you say, like an analysis of their mix. Let's see, bend clock sounds like that. Deep bass. Yeah. Who else? Mike Parker. Yeah, Mike Parker, he's the fucking legend, and he knows how it sounds. It's funny that you have the same here. Yeah, anyway, you can see that the track is basically sounding pretty good compared to other tracks and their balance. What I will just show you what this software can do, and that is, let's see, we pick this reference, we pick the Benjamin track, and it will analyze it. Sorry guys. it's trying to hit the same loudness as the Benjamin track, which of course is mastered with. Okay, I won't even say anything. When it comes to mastering, I don't know how much you know about loudness, but there has been what's called a loudness war, because our mind, we interpret something that's louder as better, basically. So what mastering and mixing engineers been trying to do over the past 30 years is to make it sound louder and louder. It really peaked like in the in the in the turn of the millennia, because back then there wasn't really any control of the mastering. It was done on CDs, cassettes, and you could do it. You could push it as fucking loud as you want, and it was just when you put the CD in and played, and it was like, yeah, it was fucking so fat. You played it on your amplifier at the same volume as you usually do, and this just really made your speakers play it fucking gritty. But these days it's different because now you have streaming and services like Spotify and Tidal and many of these similar instances where they stream music. They have a kind of penalty system where if you they analyze your music for loudness and they lower the volume if you push it too hard. So the result of that is that if you push your master hard, you lose a lot of dynamics to get it loud, and then when they play it in Spotify, it's they just lower the volume and you just plays at the same volume, only with less dynamics. So progressively these days, it's more and more common. I would say it's the norm by now that mastering is done a lot less hard. Still in underground music, it's not. You can see in techno, you can see mastering like this, where it's just so loud and hard, just to have that pumping. They released on vinyl, they released on YouTube and SoundCloud, where it's not, where it's just becomes so loud. And even if you buy the files on Bandcamp, also the files, they are louder than when you buy them from a label that masters them a bit more softly. But yeah, Hypnus, for instance, we have always had a very soft mastering. Our tracks are very low compared to a lot of other released music in this scene. Which in turn, I mean, I've noticed this because when I DJ and I hear our track, they sound so weak. I play them at the same, like, is there something wrong? And then I just turn the volume up, like, whoa, there it is. It's the same, only I have a lot more softness in the bass. I mean, the mids and the highs are floating in a different kind of way. So a good thing to there are a few different ways to approach this, and one of them is gain staging. Wait. Gain staging. Okay, should I even have mentioned that? Okay. Well, I've already made a video on mixing fundamentals, and that's the first step. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you to watch it. Wait. And the idea then is to build your mix so that eventually, when you want to push your final mix, let's see here. We want to have it at -12 LUFS, LUFS, loudness units, full scale. I will get back to what I was just talking about. We will just see here what happens when we try to have the volume at 12 LUFS. And this is the setting that, according to the Benjamin track, we need to set our limiter in order to reach the same volume. We need to pull the threshold down here and listen. Just look at the gain reduction. And then there is a new standard that says that minus 14 loudness units is like the standard. So if you push it harder, it will go down. And you will have a penalty for that. And there are websites actually. Let me check if I can find one for you. Let's see. There's this loudness unit penalty. Okay, I couldn't really find it here. Let me just check. Here. Looks like this. So this is just for reference and an interesting thing for you to try on your own mixdowns. Maybe you have a method that you use when you export your tracks and pick your loudness. Here you can pick a file. Let's say I can try it here actually. Let's see if I find a track here that I have. Ableton projects. Let's see, do I have one? Maybe here. Here, this has a limiter, so I just drop that here. And you upload your track, and it analyzes the loudness of your track, and it tells you how it will be affected. I don't know if this is the website that I usually go to, but I think there are a few more, but it kind of demonstrates this principle in a good way. Yeah, so here you see my master. If I upload it to Spotify, it will be lowered half a decibel. It will be lowered 1.3 decibels on YouTube. Let's see here if we go here, and I will, for instance, I will load the track. Okay, now I'm really shit posting Benjamin here, but he didn't do the mastering, so yeah. And we will see what happens when it was a bit louder. Maybe I will be proved wrong here, I don't know. I'm a bit terrified. Whoops. Oh, and you see, if you upload this track mastered like this on Spotify, they will lower it by almost 4 decibels, almost 5 decibels on YouTube, Tidal. You see, in this way they pushed the master so loud to sound dope or whatever, and it I mean, it will still sound punchy and all that, but you will lose a lot of timbre, a lot of what you did in the mix. When you push something that hard through a limiter, you it's like a butterfly effect all across your mix, where it pushes this and that down. It becomes pumping in a different way. So I mean, having it lowered by a half a decibel, that's nothing. You can't even tell the difference. And I find that, I mean, the golden rule is minus 14 loudness units full scale. And what this loudness is they are analyzing the track, uh, taking taking into account the psychoacoustic function of your ear. So, for instance, some frequencies, like at the 2K, 4K, we experience it clearer because that's where sound is. For instance, now when I'm talking to you, it's a lot of 3K, and this is where our ears are developed to hear and also shaped to hear. So there are different. It's kind of a complicated thing, but anyways, we don't have to understand it, thankfully. When we have tools, I think there are loudness analyzers that are free, probably. If not, I'm sure you can buy one very cheaply if you just Google it somehow. Maybe I will look it up for you and recommend it on Patreon so that you can get one, because it's a pretty cool thing for you to use. Because if you have a mix that has too much low end, that is not balanced, you will notice that when you try to get it up to even 12 decibels, it's pumping really hard. That usually means that you have too much low end, because the low end has a lot of volume to your mix. But now we will see here from the setting of the track that we used as a reference, and we will use this learn threshold so that it start analyzing the input signal and pulls the limiter to a level where it's at minus 12 loudness units. So let's see. Sorry, my computer is dying. But yeah, you see, it went from minus 20 almost to minus 15, so it lowered it by 4 or 5 decibels, and you can still see there's a lot of pumping here. And see, this is 2 decibels, I think. Yeah, that's 2 decibels, and you really don't want it to pump much more than 2. Preferably more than 1. 2 is alright, but then you're still having some coloration to your mix. And I can see here, boom, boom, boom. You see, it's very like boom, 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 boom. It's something with the bass. So what we can do then is to compress the bass only, because if you have it on the master, if the limiter is pumping on your master, it will affect the whole track. So what we can do instead is do the penalty only on the kick and the bass by using a multiband compressor. And there is one in multiband dynamics in Ableton, which is an amazing like mastering grade multiband compressor. It looks a bit weird, but it's extremely useful. I will make a video on this when I talk about compressors, talk about a bit about how to use it. But we will have a look. So the basic principles of it, we will play, see, low end, middle, we will listen. This is the low, mids, high frequencies. So here we can use, and then this is the low end, and here you have a downwards compressor and an upwards compressor. This is what you usually think of when you think of compressors. It's the upward compression, I think. Maybe I'm confusing them, whatever. So here you bring the threshold down to when it starts to affect the signal. Somewhere here, and here you have the ratio. Oh, sorry. Now let's see. My computer is dying. But you can see it's not, it's here. Peaking here. So already we have a more solid mix. You can make it even less if you want. Like this is good. You can hear now the bass is really rumbling, it's very deep. And the cool thing, you have the wet dry control. Okay, my computer is really yeah, you get the idea. Well, I think that's about it for this stream. Thank you everyone for coming. I don't know if you have any questions or if you want me to demonstrate anything before we close this session, then feel free to write a comment. I will go get a beer and I will be back to see if there are any questions, and if not, and you feel like go about your night, then thank you for watching, and I hope you will find some of the things I've shown you here today useful, and that we will see each other on Patreon and Discord or whatever soon. And for the others, we'll see you soon then, I guess. Yeah, I'm back with my beer here. Well, thanks for coming, Damien. It was a very nice experience. I mean, I've been thinking to do live streams every Tuesday, but I mean, by like now, I think by the next session, I would basically be showing you the same things over and over to a large extent. But I will, of course. Cheers, Pablo. Cheers. Yeah, that's great. Um, I think maybe for future live streams, I will have different approaches. Maybe I will not make a track from scratch. I will have maybe, for instance, where we are now, and we will do the arrangement. Maybe we will do some mixing. Um, yeah, thanks, Cigarette Lizard. It's one of the best nicknames I've seen, actually. Cigarette Lizard. uh, yeah, and we will do some fun things also. Perhaps maybe if some of you have made a track, we could mix it together. We could also. I've been thinking to make projects. I mentioned it in the beginning where we you guys send me some samples and I try to make some music with it. And that's one. Maybe we think about other fun things to do. I think maybe I don't know if I will do it every week. We'll see. I mean, doing it like this. Yeah, I I think it was helpful, and I really hope so. And I hope to see you guys around in the Discord and on Patreon. So thank you for stopping by, and I hope you have a great evening and end of the week. And Tifton and Guido, thank you for your support. It really means a lot to me, and of course everyone else tuning into this channel. So yeah, cheers and have a great evening.